Hello and welcome back. This is Dawn with another video for Picket Studios. Today we are going to be creating some paper confections using a lot of fun ways to make our die cuts pop. The main set we'll be using today is this scene building cookie making die set. I'm also going to be using this large Hooray die here from Picket. Now, this cookie making die set has everything you need to make all kinds of different sweet little treats. This is a cookie making set, but I'm going to show you how we can make chocolates, cookies, tarts, and so much more. So there's a lot of decorations in here as well as different shapes that you can layer in all kinds of fun ways. You've got a sheet pan and even some icing bags there. Now off camera, I die cut a whole bunch of these pieces just from white cardstock. So several of the different sizes and bases for our cookies and treats, along with some of the toppings and then some of these hearts here. Now I've done them all out of white, but you could do them out of colored cardstock. I've chosen white because I'm going to add the color with ink. Now to help me add my color, I'm going to be using the paper inking palette here. And this is just a large, it's a large photopolymer sheet. So it's going to have all of the same properties as your photopolymer stamps. It's going to be nice and sticky. It's going to hold your die cuts in place. You can use it for mirror stamping. You could use it for a faux words, a faux gel plate. There you go. So yeah, just a lot of great uses for it. It's got a completely smooth surface on both sides, so you don't have to worry about any texture or anything getting in the way. And like I said, because it's made out of that photopolymer, it has those same sticky properties here. So it's going to grip your glass mat or your work surface and not budge. For today's video though, I'm going to leave the plastic on the back because I want to be able to freely turn my objects as I'm adding color. All right, so I'm going to start by putting a couple of the base of my cookies or candies here onto my inking palette. And I'm going to do these in groups of like items. So anything that I'm going to kind of ink up the same, I'll go ahead and put them down in groups and I can start my inking. To do my inking, I'm going to use the new pint size pouncers or mini, I'm calling them pint size pouncers. I might be making up names here, folks. No, they are. The pint size paper wow. They're the pint size paper pouncers. And I really, really like these, you guys. First of all, they're pint size, so automatically points for being cute, right? Anything mini is absolutely adorable. So, I mean, they've got that going for them. But on top of that, they're really fun to use. If you've been in any of my lives, like pouncing is so much more fun than blending. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not giving up my blender brushes anytime soon. But pouncing's kind of fun. So here I'm just using a little Concord and Ninth wheat ink. It's the perfect color to color the base of either these cookies or chocolates. If I'm going for cookies, I'm going to pounce this on very lightly. If I'm going for chocolates, I'm going to go heavier. This wheat is a great color for both. But you can see here I'm picking up the ink from the pad and then I'm pouncing it off on my glass mat to remove some of that ink. And then I'm just pouncing the color on. I'm concentrating on the edges of the cookies because they're going to be darker. And if need be, I will pick them up and pounce a little bit more along just the edges. If I need more ink, instead of going straight to my ink pad, I'm going to pick up what I've pounced off onto my glass mat and work with that first. Then if I need more ink, I can again pick up from the ink pad, pounce off on the glass, and then go to my die cut. Now, if you want to apply a lot of color quickly, these are great because that sponge picks up a lot of color and it's going to deposit a lot of color. But again, you can control the amount by just pouncing off that excess ink onto a glass surface or a media mat if you work on those, and then take it to your project. It's always better to err on the lighter side because you can always build color, but you can't take it away. So here is the base of our cookies. You can see we've got darker around the edges, a little lighter in the middle. All right, I went ahead and did the rest of the base for my confections there. You can see over on the right-hand side, we've got some that are quite dark. Those are going to be our chocolates. And then we've got our cookie bases, and we've even got some, they look like little sesame crackers or something to me. And now we're just going to add the color to our icing, our decorations on top of our cookies and chocolates. So I'm going to do some of these, I'm going to leave some of them white, some of them I'm going to do a darker pink, and some I'm going to do a lighter pink. So I've got my pink little pint-sized pouncer here, and I'm adding a little peony ink from Pink Fresh, and we're going to just pounce that on. Again, add more or less ink to your liking. Now these are not going to give you a super smooth blend like a blending brush would, but you actually can get a pretty decent blend with these, and I will show you when I go to color the Hooray die cut. I'm actually able to get a pretty decent blend. The technique, it's all in the technique, right? You want to start off light and then get heavier. If you go in with a ton of ink on that sponge and go straight to your project, you're going to get a big blob of dark ink. But if you build it up, you're going to get a much smoother transition. Now, since we are dealing with organic items here, which in this case, cookies, they're going to have a little texture. So this is the perfect way to apply color to these and give it a more natural, realistic look. Now, speaking of organic items, we're going to turn these into little roses. So they'll be like little rose cookies. When we layer that swirl on top of that base, it's going to look like a flower, and then we'll use the hearts colored in green as the leaves. Now for the swirls here, I am going to take that pouncer and kind of hit the edges of some of this. I'm going to try to hit most all of it. This is just going to add dimension. It's going to give me a darker edge with a lighter top, and it's going to make it look more domed or three-dimensional, and that's just, again, going to add to the realism of this. So then once we adhere these together, and I'll do that a little bit later, but here you'll be able to see how this is going to look like a little rose cookie. Isn't that adorable? All right, so moving on to our next set of cookies. I'm going to color the hearts that are going to go on top of our little square cookies. So again, we're just going to use a little bit of our pinks and reds here to color those up, and they will eventually get adhered to the top of these little squared ones, which are going to be like sugar cookies with hearts on top. You could also layer these on top of the other little heart cookies, and they could be like iced heart cookies. All right, so once all of my coloring is done, all of my pouncing, it's time to get onto the fun part, all of the little good confectionery details that make these look like shiny chocolates or sugar covered cookies, things like that. And what better to use for some sugar cookies than our little frosted crystal and rock candy combo. Y'all, I have found another use for it. I told you I was just going to glitter all the things. Now, if you haven't seen this before, I will have a full video on this technique in my description, in the video description box below. However, what I've done is I've pressed this into Versamark, dipped it into frosted crystal, melted that with my heat tool. Now I'm dipping it directly into the rock candy glitter, and then I'm going to use my heat gun to set that. So what this is going to do, that frosted crystal is going to melt, it's going to become sticky, the rock candy is going to stick to that, and then we're going to heat it again to kind of seal that in. So it'll reheat that frosted crystal and trap that glitter in there. And that glitter is there for good. It does not shed, it does not come off, and look at how sparkly and shiny that is. It looks like it is just covered in sugar, doesn't it? So good. All right, so from here you can just pick your topping. You can choose to have, you know, like a fondant heart on top, or a, an iced heart. You could use some of the little zigzaggy things so it looks like you just piped some icing on. It's all up to you. There are a lot of choices included in the die set, so you can just have fun making all kinds of different cookies. Now for the roses, I wanted to be more precise with my application here, so I'm using an embossing pen to apply that embossing ink, and then I'll just use those same steps. I'll dip this into the frosted crystal embossing powder, melt that with my heat gun, and then dip it into the rock candy, and then reheat it with my heat gun. And this is going to give me just a little bit of that glitter there in only the parts that I applied the embossing ink. I'll do the same thing to the leaves for this one. All right, with all of our cookies decorated, it's time to look at how to decorate some of the chocolate. Now for the chocolate, we need that high shine, and there is no better way to do that than with some Glossy Accents. Now, me and Glossy Accents, we have a love-hate relationship, but again, like I said, there is no better way to get a high shine than with Glossy Accents. So this is where keeping that backer on that inking palette is really going to come into play. I can apply my Glossy Accents and just spin the paper palette and then keep applying my Glossy Accents. This is going to keep me from having to put my hand in awkward positions, and it's also going to keep me from having to touch this die cut while I'm applying the Glossy Accents. Very similarly to the real cookie decorating, where they'll decorate on a Lazy Susan type thing so they can just spin the cookie. So this works really well. Now if you have any bubbles, you can use a safety pin or a needle or a toothpick to kind of pop those bubbles. Now you'll notice here I'm using the toothpick to kind of push that Glossy Accents as close to the edge as I can. I applied it very close to the edge, but not right up to the edge. Instead, I'm using this toothpick to kind of spread the Glossy Accents up to the very edge of this die cut without going over. I found this to be the easiest way to do it and the least messy way. And similarly to decorating with royal icing cookies, I like to outline the shape first and then flood the interior with the Glossy Accents. So we're just going to finish off the rest of these and then we will set them aside to dry. While I waited, I went ahead and started on my background. Now I've already die cut this big Hooray word die from white cardstock, and I'm going to ink this up in ombre or gradient of dark pink to light pink. Again, I'm using those pint-sized pouncers, and I'm going to start with my darkest color. Just like before, I'm going to pick up the ink onto my pouncer, and I'm going to pounce off the excess ink onto an acetate sheet over here, and then I'm going to bring it to my project. This is just going to allow me to control how much ink is deposited at once. I'm going to pick up extra ink from either my acrylic sheet or direct from my ink pad, depending on how dark I want it to be. If I'm just trying to even out an area, I'll pick up from that acrylic sheet. If I want to apply heavier color, I'll pick up from the ink pad. So where I left off with the darker pink, I'm going to pick up with the lighter pink. So you can see that lighter pink is almost the exact same shade as the darker pink where it starts to get lightest. So I just start where I left off, and now I'm going to cover the rest of the die cut with the lighter pink. Now this is going to look splotchier than it will dry to. Dye inks always kind of even out as they dry, lighten up just a little bit. That's because your water base is going to evaporate as it dries, and it's going to leave behind the pigment. The paper is going to, as it dries, get a little bit lighter. So I really like the pouncers for coloring detailed die cuts like this, or words that maybe have some delicate areas that the blending motion might distort your die cut. This is just a great way to add color. Plus, pouncing's fun. I'm not gonna lie. It's that little repetitive motion is actually, I don't know, it's kind of fun. Maybe I'm weird, but I have a really good time pouncing. I really need to get out more. Okay, so with that done, I've adhered my Hooray die cut to a cream colored card base here, and it's time to start putting together all of our little confections and arranging them on our card front. So you can see I've decorated all of my cookies, and now I'm going to adhere them to what should be a scalloped cookie base. I'm turning it into a little paper liner. So think of like a cupcake liner or the little paper cups that chocolates come in when you buy a box of chocolates. That's what I'm using this little shape for. Don't forget to look at your dies, and especially when they're simple shapes like this, they can always double as something else. So the little sheet pan there that the rose is sitting on right now, that is from the scene building, the bakery scene building kit. I'll have everything linked below. But that is a cute little sheet pan, and it's obviously not the correct scale for these cookies or these chocolates. However, don't be afraid to play with your scale. This is overall a pretty whimsical card, so it definitely works. It doesn't have to be to scale to work with your design. So now I'm just going to kind of pepper these throughout the design, framing out that hooray. I know my sentiment is going to go in the center on a decorative label, so I'm going to scatter the cookies around the perimeter of the card. And again, I'm always trying to create balance in both shape, color, and weight. So once I'm pretty satisfied with where it's going, I'm going to stop and take care of my sentiment because I need to know where that's going to go first before I finish out the entire design. And for that, we're going to use the Lick the Bowl sentiment set. I'm using this Life is Short, Lick the Bowl. Super cute, sage advice. Just lick the bowl, wear the suit. You know, we deprive ourselves of so much. For what? Life is short. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp this in the center of a label here. I'm going to stamp it in ground espresso, and then I'm going to heat emboss this with a little bit of embossing glaze in, I think this is walnut stain. And that's going to give it a little bit of a shine, and that's just going to match all of the glossy accents we have going on our chocolates. And now it's time to adhere everything together. So this card has a ton of dimension, both physically, with color, with the different mediums, and we're even going to be adding some paper glaze luxe to this at the very end. So there's a lot of dimension here. I'm going to be using several layers of foam tape. Some of my cookies are going to be adhered flat to the card base. Some are going to be laying on top of each other, so I'll need foam tape to pop those up a little bit. Some of them are going to be laying over the label. So I'm going to build this in stages. I'm going to adhere the ones to the card base first, and then I'm going to adhere the ones that are on top of those cookies second. I'm going to go ahead and put down my label here and double check what all is going to sit on top of that, because again, I got to make sure that I get my height of my foam tape right so that everything is flush, level, and stable. So once I've figured out where everything is going to go, I can go ahead and adhere my label in place. And I'm going to stick this right in the center. I'm using my grid mat to make sure everything is straight and centered. And with that in place, I can start adhering everything down. So I'll use a little bit higher profile foam tape to clear the label. I'll use liquid adhesive for anything that's sitting directly on top of the label. And then because our label is popped up, I can go ahead and tuck things underneath the label as well. I had so much fun creating this card. Just coming up with different ways to emulate, the cookie decorating techniques and things with paper and the supplies that we have in our arsenal as crafters. It was just a blast. And I might have made way more than I needed, but I'm sure I'll use them eventually on other projects. All right, so once I was pretty much all done, I thought, you know what, I need another sheet pan on the right side. It was just a little heavy on the left side. And remember, I like to balance it with weight, color, and size and shape. So I needed another sheet pan over on that right side. So I went ahead and cut another one of those, tucked it underneath the label this time, and then just adhered my cookie on top again. And I liked this much better. So there's one last little detail here. You'll notice we have what looks like these little cookie crumbles on this one little cookie here. I'm going to show you how I did that. I used some paper glaze luxe and chocolate frosting. And I wasn't sure if this was going to look the way I had envisioned in my head. Luckily, it did. So we're going to go ahead and do a few more of these cookies. Now, originally, I used a toothpick to do this. I could not find my toothpick. I was too lazy to go get a new one. So I just grabbed my paper piercer. You could also use a paintbrush to do this. I personally don't have a paintbrush that I don't mind getting gunked up with paste. So a toothpick worked actually a lot better because I'm kind of pouncing this on. I don't want this to be smeared flat. I want it to retain all of that crumbly texture. So by pouncing it on, it's going to have a more crumbly cookie-like texture. So again, this is what worked for me. I'd recommend using a toothpick, not your paper piercer. So I just scoop it out of the jar and then just tap it onto the areas of my choice. So here I'm just tapping in a little bit along the edge of this cookie and just a few little speckles here and there to make it look like it's crumbly. And then I'll pick another cookie and do the exact same thing. Then I will set this aside to completely dry, and it retains all of that texture and that height and that little crumbled cookie look that is perfect for this die set. And we'll review this finished card at the end. But for now, I told you I made a lot of cookies, so we're going to make another card. This one's going to go super quick. So I cut the cookie sheet here. This is from the cookie making die set. And I've got some extra little cookies over here to the side. So we're going to do a little grid style. I've cut another label here. Now this one reminds me of those paper doilies that you can put under treats to keep your plate clean or to catch any butter or grease. And we're going to, like I said, arrange these in a grid style. And then in the open area, we're going to stamp our sentiment. And again, we're going to be using that same Lick the Bowl stamp set. This one says, life has more balance with a cookie in each hand. And isn't that true? So eventually I'm going to stamp this here right in this empty spot, but first I want to make a couple more elements to finish out this card. So they have this little piping bag included in the die set as well. So I'm going to go ahead and create 2 of those. I originally thought I was only going to use 1, but the finished design ended up with 2. So I've die cut this from some gray cardstock and then again from white. And then I'm going to add a little bit of color here to make it look like there's some icing in the bag. And then I'm just going to assemble everything together. And this is really easy. You have your base piece and then all of your top pieces just fit together like a puzzle. So for all of the parts that would be metal, like the tip, the icing tip, I've cut that from silver. And then the little clip on the end of the bag, that's from silver as well. And these turned out so cute and are such an adorable little touch to add to this set. Okay, so all that's left to do is stamp my sentiment and assemble the card. So let's go ahead and review the finished cards. And I could not be happier with how they turned out. So for our first card, again, we used the scene building cookie making die set from Picket Fence. We added a lot of different mediums here to really amp these die cuts up. From glitter to glossy accents to the paper glaze luxe, we were really able to add a lot of textural elements to this card and just really transform these die cuts into something that looks like little candies, right? I just absolutely adore this. And then that big hooray in the background is a great little backdrop to showcase all of our little cookies. It just adds a little something to the background without distracting from the cookies themselves. So I really love the way this one turned out. Now for our second card, this one I'm equally as chuffed with. So adorable. We've got all that glitter and sparkle. You'll notice that I've stacked my die cuts. So each of the bases I cut 3 times and stacked them on top of each other. This gives them a lot more weight and makes it resemble more of a cookie. And then adding that little extra bit of brown around the edges, again, just helps to reinforce that cookie vibe. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you picked up some tips and tricks that you can incorporate into your crafting. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. I will have all of the featured Picket Fence items used in today's video linked in the video description below. So be sure to check there if you're looking for anything. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.